Today we're talking about the reconquista and how the level-headed conservative Iberian kingdoms destroyed the riptard Moors with facts and logic. Be sure to like and subscribe to find out what racial slur gets me cancelled. We need to talk about one of the longest military conflicts in human history. It's a conflict that had a deep impact in the history of both Portugal, my home country, and our neighbor, Spain. It was such an impact, in fact, that the morality developed during it directly affected Spanish and Portuguese colonial empires. Yes, I'm talking about the Reconquista. So, no, the opening wasn't just a shitpost. And I also want to address the fact that, obviously, a lot of my videos are rather simple. They don't go too deep into details, my last video being a key example. But I don't want to do that with this subject. So this video will be the first of a series of videos talking about the conflict, about the Reconquista. With this series, I want to explore how this conflict unfolded on the peninsula, how the civilian population was affected, how the conflict kept going and ended, and lastly, the very real impacts that this military conflict has on our world today. So, let's get started. A YouTuber with 80 subscribers starts a second YouTube series before ending the first one. I'm a professional. Trust me on this. Our story begins in 7-Eleven. Yes, in the convenience store. Some Muslim dude hopped the counter of a 7-Eleven store, punched the store manager in the face, and took over the store for himself. All the while, the manager went out back for a smoke break. In the year of 7-Eleven, a Muslim commander crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, and over the course of 7 years, completely conquered the Iberian Peninsula, driving the Visigoths into the mountains of Asturias. That commander was called Tariq, unpronounceable Zaid. Now, we don't know exactly where he came from, but most sources agree that he came from here, Algeria, and that he was also Berber. I'm saying this with a Portuguese pronunciation. I have no idea how to say it with an English or American pronunciation, and I don't care. Yes, Tariq was from Algeria, but we don't know exactly where in Algeria he was from. There were many tribes in the area. He belonged to one of them. He was a commander for the Umayyad Caliphate, and he was appointed as the governor of the city of Tangiers after its conquest, which happened around the same time frame that Tariq would invade Iberia. But this poses a question. Why did the Umayyads invade Iberia? What did they want with this dusty old region that was occupied by a literal barbarian kingdom? The answer to that is quite interesting. So we're going to leave to the side Big Dick Tariq for a moment and talk about the Visigoths, the people who ruled the peninsula when the Moors invaded. Now, the Visigoth kingdom, let's look at the map. You can see it comprises about all of the Iberian Peninsula and even France. The hell? I guess so. But they actually lost most of France soon after. And there were a ton of issues that plagued the Visigoths throughout pretty much their entire rule of the peninsula. For starters, the Visigothic population was actually around 1 to 2% of the kingdom's population. They were the minority. In fact, Visigoths actually came from Central Europe into Iberia and settled here. So, for a lot of their early rule of the peninsula, they had to deal with uprisings and rebellions from the Romanized local population who didn't want outsider rule. And let's add to the fact, this guy, Emperor Justinian of the Byzantine Empire, who who started his own epic reconquest. He landed armies in the peninsula and seized a sizable chunk of the Visigoths' kingdom for himself. The Byzantines, in fact, were only dislodged after several decades of warfare, but eventually they were. And that was also not exactly the end of the kingdom's troubles. Regicides were also a severe issue. There were a ton of people who thought they could do better than the last guy in charge, and so they shot their shot. So, starting in 601, the new Visigoth king was a man named Ryuva II. He was deposed by a noble called V. It's this. This is his name. I'm gonna call him Tim, though. So, the great and fearless monarch Tim ruled for 7 years only, as he was kicked out by another guy after those 7 years. And for the next 21 years, the office of king was the most dangerous job in the realm. There was constant plotting, murder, you name it. Honestly though, they were really living up to the Roman ideal of murdering your boss. However, one good thing did come out of this period of chaos. The Byzantines were finally, definitively kicked out in the year of 631. This chaos can be mostly attributed to a conflict that was ongoing between the nobility and the monarchy. I mean, what else? We're approaching the age of feudalism where nobles have a lot of power to do as they please. Eventually, the nobles won this conflict, making it so that they elected the king through a special council. No more one family ruling the country. We choose, said the nobles. But then, after electing one of their kings, some nobles in the back think to themselves, wait, this new king kinda sucks. Maybe we should team up and oust him? And so, of course, regicides kept happening. Admittedly, a bit less than usual. So you get the picture. Constant chaos and war plagued the Visigoths, and despite their minority status within their own kingdom gradually decreasing, as they themselves gradually adopted the local culture, it was still chaos. There was war, there was political manipulation, their system was broken. And if your government doesn't work in this time, you leave yourself wide open for invasions. By 711, Roderick now rules the Visigoths, and he was in the north of the country, fighting against the Asturians, who have been waging a guerrilla war ever since they got conquered over a century ago. And guess who just crossed the strait with a big host? Our good old friend Tariq, weird named Ziad. Tariq's conquest was fast, considering the size of the peninsula and the obvious fact that he was fighting a war against an entire kingdom. Now, the Muslims were already aware of what was on the peninsula. They had sent many scouting parties to the peninsula and also raiding parties, who both returned with a ton of good spoils and a lot of good stories about what was here. And to add to that, apparently they viewed Iberia as Route B to get to Constantinople? What? Oh, that's apparently what one of their caliphs said, that the route to Constantinople lies through Spain. It's another theory as to why the Moors invaded. A different guy, Walter Kegi, argues that it was just military reasons, but anyways, rich spoils and the universal desire for land led to the Muslim Empire to invade Iberia, with Tariq at the forefront of this invasion. So he lands at Gibraltar, and he starts raiding throughout the south of modern-day Spain. It's only when he meets the Visigoth king in open battle that the conquest officially begins. Now, we don't know exactly what happened that day, Hell, we don't even know the proper troop counts for each armies, or where the battle even took place. But Arab historians at the time give Roderick the stupid amount of about 100,000 soldiers. 100% because of propaganda and just jerking themselves off. More likely is that both armies had around 7,000 troops each, with the Muslim army being made up of mostly Berbers and some Arab troops. But here is what we definitely know about this battle. Roderick, the Visigoth king, died here, and chaos ensued. Roderick, like the previous men in his position, came to power through a coup, and he had his fair share of enemies. It is, in fact, suspected that some of his own men who hated him stood down during the battle and gave Tariq's men an opening to attack his line. It should also be said that the main source on why the Visigoths lost come from old Moorish sources, from the same people who defeated the Visigoths. So again, take the shit that I'm saying with a grain of salt. Although, to back up the Moorish claims, we have the fact that the Visigoths had severe problems with just letting kings sit calmly on their throne without giving them a little stab in the back. But you know, I feel it. I know it was true. I feel it in my Moorish blood. Everything these historians say is true. I know it. The king died in the final hours of the battle, and his opponents, for standing down during the battle, thought they'd be fine, so they started heading back home. They were wrong. Visigoth casualties for the battle were astronomical. Most of the army, including the parts which left the battle, were destroyed and slaughtered. The Moors themselves lost about a quarter of their army, but with just one battle, they scored a big victory. They didn't conquer the peninsula all by themselves, actually. A good example that I need to point out is Iberian Jews, a minority within the Visigothic kingdom which was facing increasing xenophobia from the ruling class and Hispanic locals. At the Battle of Guadalete, there was a Jewish general named Kara al-Yahudi. I am definitely mispronouncing that name. This general led a mixed contingent of Jews and Berbers against Roderick's army, and during the early years of Moorish conquest, there would be sizable garrison of Jewish soldiers in many conquered cities, one example being Seville. But again, most of what I'm telling you is myths. It's essentially just that, myths. Honestly, I wish I could tell you that the Jewish soldiers themselves won the battle single-handedly when they called down their Jewish space laser. But I can't. The involvement of Jews is another myth. But we still know enough about the battle to say that it ended with Tariq victorious, and the Visigoths very much the losers. After the battle ended, Tariq was reinforced by an army from his superior, Musa, weird last name I don't dare to say. There it is. What followed is, in the year 713, a Visigoth count by the name of Theodemir. Him and his people were a pile of bones, so Theodemir was the count of Murcia, and he surrendered to the Moorish army. And about 2 years later, a man named Jim, his name was definitely Jim, was made the first governor of the new province of Al-Andalus, and he made Seville his capital. And by 720, most of the peninsula was conquered, with what little remained of the Visigoths fleeing to the north of Iberia to form the kingdom of Asturias. The Moors themselves would go on to threaten the south of France, but they were defeated at the hands of the Franks. But the reign of the Moors had begun, and the foundation for a millennium of bloody conflict was laid. Tariq himself led the conquest of Iberia, personally capturing Toledo, while a division of his army captured the city of Córdoba. And in the span of a decade, an entire country which kinda struggled to find its footing throughout its entire existence was defeated and annexed by a much larger kingdom, one which was at the height of its power and might. Tariq and Musa, the other man who joined in the invasion a year later, would both be recalled back to Damascus, just 3 years after the beginning of the invasion, where they would live out the rest of their days. But this isn't the end of the story by any stretch of the imagination. While the conquest of Iberia was over, it wasn't complete. A lone Catholic kingdom remained in the far north of the peninsula, resisting Moorish attempts to invade, much like the locals had for years resisted Visigoth attempts to invade before. And while the Umayyad Empire was at its height, it was quickly about to stumble down and collapse under its own weight. In the next video, I want to look at what happened. What weakened the Moors enough to officially begin the reconquista? I want to see the politics that guided Moorish Iberia, the rebellions they faced, and I want to learn more about the collapse of the Umayyads and the rise of the Abbasids. I want to see how the longest conflict in human history finally started. Thanks for watching.